Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. It's time for the latest episode of Let's Talk About with me, Andrew Musgrove, and John Gibson. And this week we're talking about Newcastle United's right wing. Quite an appropriate title given the fact we're in the middle of an election. But don't worry, we're not going to have any distasteful politicians adorning the black and white shirt standing in front of the Jackie Milburn statue. No, this is all about Newcastle's right wing in terms of Miguel Almiron, Jacob Murphy, and the rest, and who could be signed in that position this summer. Plenty of big names linked, some contact made with some of those big names as well. It's going to be a very exciting summer to come. Before we begin, John, I hope you're well. You've been on your jollies. You're looking fresh. Did you have a nice time?
Yes, everything was good. And, you know, looking forward to this is almost as exciting, Andrew, as the season, isn't it? Because we're looking for who might come in. We're desperate for people to come in. We've already got Lloyd Kelly through the door, which is an early start because that's ahead of the field. He can't actually be registered until July the 1st, but he's ours already, which is good. Maybe Trafford to follow. So it's warming up nicely, and we wanted that, didn't we? We were praying for that after the last transfer window when nothing happened because of financial fair play. And no doubt we'll be going into that because that is restricting us awfully. Without that restriction, my Jove, we would go and scatter the pigeons, wouldn't it? But, it's not as easy as that. Hence, Kelly's a great signing for a multitude of reasons, but one of which is he's a free transfer that leaves us with our powder dry for elsewhere. But it is difficult at the moment with the financial fair play thing to stay on the right side of the law. And Newcastle are determined to, and I'm delighted that they are.
And just give us a bit more about Lloyd Kelly. Are you excited about that signing? He's a very versatile player, primarily a centre back, but can play at left back. He's worked with Eddie Howe before as well, which I think is always a good sign. You've mentioned the fact that he's cost absolutely nothing because he's on a free transfer. A good start to the window.
Yes, I think it is. He's absolute quality. He's quick. And I think while we are quick going forward, i.e., particularly up front, we weren't quick defensively. We got caught out on a couple of goals last season because we hadn't that quickness. The players were rather on-paced and labouring, and he brings a quickness. But he's also got that ability on the ball. He doesn't just defend, he can step out with the ball, ping it about. He is absolute top of the range quality. He's only 25. He's already skipper at the side. He's got leadership problems. I don't think he's an automatic skipper. We don't need a skipper, but we need leadership because we've lost people like Richie and Dummett who were in there in a sanctum, if you like. He's got all that. There's always a but. With any transfer, Andrew, there's always a but. And the only but with Kelly is not on ability. You know what? I don't wish him good luck because he doesn't need good luck. He's already played in the Premier League. He's already proved he can play in the Premier League. And he is absolutely oozing quality, so he doesn't need good luck. What he needs is good health. That's the one thing, because what is wrong with him, if anything's wrong with him, is he's rather injury prone. He missed 17 games with 3 different injuries last season and 18 the previous season. That terrifies Geordies and makes the blood run cold because we've got a million of those, haven't we? We've got a million of guys. Dear me, the one good thing is he won't be able to get in the treatment room because it'll already be full and the door will be locked. But that aside, that is a little concern for me because we are knee deep in injury problems last season. We got a wonderful player out of Bournemouth who had an injury problem, and that was Callum Wilson. And now we've got a wonderful player out of Bournemouth who has an injury problem. But hopefully that problem will not resurface and resurface. If you put that to one side, and it's only a minor doubt, then every single box has been ticked.
Yeah, fingers crossed he can play more games than he has done in the previous 2 campaigns. And just briefly before we get on to the main topic of the video, John, there you mentioned the financial fair play rules and the profit and sustainability rules that Newcastle United are having to juggle. We've seen Man City launch this lawsuit against the Premier League, which, if they win, will essentially allow clubs the companies that are linked to the clubs to pay whatever they like for sponsorships. And at the moment, it's all done by fair market value. It's looked at to see if it is indeed a fair price being paid. Where do you stand on this? Because me and Aaron spoke about this on the Monday show, where we said we don't want Man City to win this battle, because ripping up the rules to that extent will just make it totally unfair for anyone else bar Newcastle and Man City to be competitive in the Premier League. And it's quite ironic that Man City are bringing this lawsuit and saying the Premier League is uncompetitive, when actually, the rest of the Premier League will turn around and say, you just won 4 titles on the bounce. What are you on about? Our take, mine and Aaron's take, got a little bit of stick from quite a few fans. Where do you stand on it?
It's a good question, because if you're totally biased, you would be for it, because it would open the door to Newcastle United and all the straitjackets. We've been put in a straitjacket, thrown in the Tyne and told to swim. And of course, this would eliminate all that. And the rich are going to get richer and the poor is going to get poorer. And Aston Villa want this lifted, because they're in a situation for financial takeoff. And we wouldn't be alone, just Man City. Villa would love it. Liverpool would be all right. Chelsea don't give a damn anyway, do they? I mean, are Chelsea aware that there's rules? Because they don't seem to play by any rules, so they're already doing it and scattering the pigeons. And I mean, if you're going to, morally, it would be a wrong thing. It would open the door. But you know what? I mean, it's happening in a totally different way now, Andrew. But the rich have always been rich and the poor has always been poor. And 20, 30 years ago, when Carlisle come up into the old First Division for that one season and topped it after 3 games and went down the same season, they weren't playing on a level playing field. Luton aren't playing on a level playing field. Ipswich won't. There'll always be the rich and the poor. Yes, I can see why some fans would have a dip at what you and Aaron was saying, because if you're totally biased and you don't give a monkeys, then they would have helped Newcastle for this rule. But yes, you've got to keep some semblance of order in all this. But you know what's ironic with Man City? They're actually going to have everything their own way, or they're going to have all their titles taken off them. I mean, they're getting done, so their answer to getting done is open the cage and let the lion out and we'll attack you. We are going to sue you. I mean, the football world at the moment's gone mad. We don't know whether Man City are going to be relegated to the conference and play gated, or whether they're going to open up the whole new world to where you can do what you like, which used to be the old days in football, didn't it? If you go back far enough, there was never any restrictions to what you could spend or not spend. I know it's a different world now, and this would be unfair. But you know what? We're already accused of being unfair, aren't we? Well, because we've got Saudi owners, we're already a target for everybody all over the country to scattergun us, because we've got these awful owners that we shouldn't have, and we're state-owned, and all the things Man City have had, and all the things the moralists come out with. And I can understand every word of it. So, I mean, in a way, I'm pleased it's not up to me what happens, that I just stand back and accept what happens. And if the restrictions stay on, well, that's morally correct. And if they come off, we benefit, that's good. So I'll just take the decision as it comes. What I'm smiling about with City, though, is City are either going to be battered into the ground and get all their titles nicked, or they're going to keep all their titles, survive, and then get everything their own way. It's a heck of a fight for them, isn't it?
It is 2 extremes there. Let us know in the comments your thoughts on that Man City lawsuit, and are you for it because it will benefit Newcastle, or do you agree with me now and are against it? Or are you like John, kind of just going to accept it either way it falls? Right, let's get on to the main topic of this conversation. It is, let's talk about Newcastle United's right wing. As I said in the introduction, plenty of big names linked, contact made with Crystal Palace's Michael Olise, which is in a very, very, very exciting start of the window. And if they got him over the line, that would be some statement. We'll talk more about Michael Olise later in the show, and the other big players linked to Newcastle United this summer. It's clearly a priority for Eddie Howe and his transfer team. But I feel it's only right to start with what Newcastle United have currently got in that position. and what the future holds for the 3 or 4 players that they do have available on the right wing. And John, will start with the man that is always provoking debate, especially between us two, and that is Miguel Almiron. Had you said this time last summer that Newcastle United need to cash in, I think I would not have been in the minority when I said, no, you keep him at all costs, because he'd had a storming season.
You were on his fan club at the time, if I remember, and you tried to recruit me.
I did, and that only closed last month after he threw himself to the floor against Brighton. But, the season before last, he was absolutely unstoppable. 11 goals in 41 games. He was so crucial to Newcastle United clinching Champions League football. The season just gone, however, he's actually played more games, 45, but only scored 5 goals. And it's fair to say that he reverted to type. He fell back into that, kind of goalless winger that he is. No one's doubting his effort and commitment and ability to listen to instructions, but the end product is just not there. And at 30 years of age, John, I think now is the time to cash in. What about yourself?
Yeah, I've always said that of Miggy, who I adore, because he's so infectious, isn't he? That big wide smile, and he's so infectious. But I've always said that he flatters to deceive. And we used to have a little bit of fun when we pulled each other's leg about exactly that. You were with Almiron fan club and were trying to get me to recruit, especially during that wonderful season. But what I also said, and I'm not being clever at all, Andrew, but what I also said during that season, if you're long in the tooth as I am, because you've been around as long as I am, I've seen players time and time again have a great scoring season. But it's only one. In the whole Newcastle career, you'll get a player that has a good scoring season. Supermac had a good scoring season every season. So did Alan Shearer. So did scores of other Newcastle players. Because so did Pop Robson, who never got an England cap. Scored all the time. They're the proper players. Now, you can have a season like Almiron had, and everything you hit went in and he looked great. But I remember you pulling my leg at the time saying, John, you must be getting a bit worried. That's 11 now and he's doing terrific. And I did remember saying to you, yes, but let him do it next season. Let him do it next season, because players can have a good season. I love him to death in terms of him being a lovely boy, in terms of him caring, in terms of his blistering speed. But how often have I used the phrase, I don't want Usain Bolt, I want a good footballer. And the one thing that lets Miggy down is his finishing and assists. Not only does he not score enough goals, in my humble opinion, but he's not clever on assists. He'll turn inside. He'll not get his head up before the ball's crossed. He'll just hit it on the run and hope that if he's hitting a bit of space and somebody's attacking that space. I mean, it's all, we've said this many times, Andrew, it's all bricks in the wall. And originally, Almiron and Maxi, outside right and outside left, were bricks in the wall, and they were the important part of the team. Maxi's been sold, and Almiron should get sold this summer. We have overtaken the era of Almiron and Maxi. They were very necessary to take us from the previous era, which was deeper into the Ashley thing. These guys had been here quite a while, and the time has come to cash in on Almiron. He's a lovely boy, etc., etc. Somebody will take him because they'll see his pace and they'll see his quickness, and the club he goes to will not be as advanced as us. By the way, he'll not get a club better than ours. That's a knocking bet, because Miggy would not be, if a club is better than ours, Miggy would not be advancing in any way. He will get a club that want to get to where we are. And I think that I would sell Almiron just as we sold Maxi, because these sort of players are expendable, whereas Bruno and Isaac and Gordon aren't expendable if you're going to get anywhere. So you sell Almiron and you keep Murphy for the bench, not for the team, for the bench. Because these days, a team's not 11 players, a team's 20 players. So you have to have a bench. Now, Murphy will sit on the bench more comfortable than Almiron will. And also, he'll be on slightly less wages, I would suspect. And also, you're going to get a slightly better fee for Almiron than you'll get for Murphy. So everything tells you cash in on Almiron, you keep Murphy for the bench.
Yeah, without a shadow of doubt, Murphy stops me. I thought he finished the season really strongly. We'll talk about a bit more about him in a moment. But I think the fee's really interesting for Miguel Almiron. Look, he could have gone to Saudi Arabia back in January for around £30 million. He didn't want to go. It appears he doesn't want to go to the Middle East this summer, which on one hand I applaud because not many players, John, turned down that lucrative offer. I mean, we saw Ruben Neves, who was very honest about his reasons going. He said, it sets up my family. That's why I'm going. Yes, there's a project here, but, it means that my family are sorted for life. It appears Miguel Almiron's not on the same train of thought. He still thinks he's got something to offer, whether it be in the Premier League or in one of the top leagues in Europe. So I applaud that. But from a Newcastle point of view, it probably does mean that they lose out, you would say, between 5 and 10 million on the sale fee, which isn't great because they need to raise funds. But if he ends up going to a side in Spain or Italy, where there's not much money to begin with anyway, or indeed a side in the Premier League, John, you're going to be looking, like I say, at least 5 or 10 million less on the price tag than you would if he ended up in Saudi Arabia, which is not what Newcastle want.
Yeah, I mean, you'll not get, because the Saudis will pay obscene money and they'll pay money over the market value because they've got so much of it, it doesn't make much difference. And Saudi football splits people, doesn't it? First of all, you get people that are honest, like Neves, who say, well, I'll go out there because my family's looked after for the rest of the time. Mitrovic, who's about to play against England on Sunday, went out for exactly the same reasons. He almost caused a riot at Fulham when it looked as if Fulham were blocking his transfer out there because it sets his family up. And yes, that is the reason why 9/10 of the players go out there. But it doesn't always work. Look at Henderson. Henderson went out there. Don't tell me Henderson went out there to build bridges or to do this or to do that or to do that. He went out there for the lolly. And he suddenly found that his family and him didn't like it out there and he didn't like the standard of football and he was off to Ajax and he managed to escape from it. A lot of people, most people go to Saudi for the money. One or two people actually look at Saudi and the heat and the standard of football and the relentless training on you physically and your family. What do they do during the day when you train? They get very bored out there. Perhaps the wife and the kids haven't got the freedom that they're used to in this country, etc. So they don't want to go. And I can understand why Miggy would not want to go to Saudi. It doesn't appeal to him and his family. I understand that. And that's his right to say that that's a transfer I don't want. And then Newcastle would have to be. It's the same, isn't it? We say that just because the club want you to do something, you don't have to do it. My Jove, don't we know that? Isaac Hayden, Jeff Hendrick, we can name them all. They've had 6-year contracts in Newcastle and we haven't been able to get rid of them. For donkey's years, they've had to go out on loan all the time because the player said, no, I'm not leaving because I want the wages that you agreed to pay me. It's unfortunately a two-way street and you can't force players. We're only beginning to get rid of some of those players now. So we can't force Almiron and we'll just have to take the going rate from him. And it will not be as big as it would be with Saudi, but I still think that he'll make us a few more quid than Murphy would. And Murphy is the better man with the greater options in his play and a willingness to sit on the bench and buy in. If you've been a first team regular like Almiron has been for seasons, it is difficult to then reduce and become and sit on the bench. I know Lascelles did that, and good luck to him. He was magnificent in doing that because it was very odd being club captain as well, an integral part of Newcastle's team, and then you're just a bench warmer. I don't think Miggy wants that, and I don't think he wants Saudi. But we'll have to take what we take, whether he goes to Spain or whether another club, further down the Premier League pecking order, take him.
It's certainly going to be interesting. I mean, the one club that has been linked has been Ipswich, but it's some jump in the way of life going from Newcastle down to Ipswich. And also, if you're looking at a fee, look, we can pluck numbers out the air. He signed for 21 million. I think if he stays in the Premier League, Newcastle will not get more than that. And then if it is someone like Ipswich, are they really going to spend the bulk of their transfer budget, even if it's 12, 15 million, which I think would be undervaluing the Almiron, but let's just deal without those figures. That would be a large chunk of their budget. I can't see how they could afford him. And Newcastle certainly aren't going to let him go out on loan. So I don't know if the
No.
Premier League is really a viable option for him. I mean,
Plus, you don't have to. You don't. I mean, clubs do silly things in transfer markets.
Well,
That's
that's
why you
true.
brought rules in, like, because they do silly things. And of course, if you buy Miggy for 20 million, it's not 20 million up front. You can stagger those payments over years. So you've eased the pain, if you like, by staggering the payments, as long as Newcastle agree to that, and they would agree to that. But I mean, there's a reason to keep Almiron is because we're not going to make a real lot of money out of him. And I don't think that's a reason to get. You've got to look first and foremost and say who's expendable, then try to get the best money you can for that guy. But don't keep him just because he won't go to Saudi. And you know what I mean? Somebody's got to be jettisoned somewhere. And you can say, we'll keep Wilson because you can't buy a centre forward for under 60 million, and he's a centre forward and he scores goals. So we'll keep him. We'll keep Almiron because he doesn't make enough money. Well, if you want to make enough money, sell Isaac and Bruno. But where does that leave you? You know, you've got to decide Almiron is not of the quality for our first team. Wilson is not available enough for our first team. Sell. You've got to make big decisions. You can't sit on the fence. If you're the manager, the first thing you do is decide whether they're expendable or not. The club then get as much as they can for the guy or not.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I agree. I'm not saying, by the way, keep him because we're not going to, because Newcastle won't get a boatload of money. You get the best deal for him. You know, the point was with the Premier League, you're going to have to probably significantly reduce your asking price to get rid of him, and you get the best deal, as you say, whatever that might be. But also, I do get the feeling that if Eddie Howe finished the transfer window with Miguel Almiron still in his squad, he wouldn't be totally against that because he does like him and he does see him as a first team asset. And
he's not a first team starter anymore, though, is he? He's not a first team starter anymore. Murphy's got in ahead of him. Eddie likes everybody. Eddie likes the tea lady, and he likes the steward at the Gallagher end. And Eddie officially likes everybody. He's that sort of guy. But he liked Maxi, but we still sold him. He likes Richie and Dummett, but they've still gone. You can't like somebody. It's not a competition for who's Mr. Nice Guy. It's what he can do for the club. And he likes all these players. And that's good. By the way, that's good because that camaraderie we've got. But somebody's got to go. If for us to progress, somebody's got to go. And Wilson and Almiron, in my humble opinion, and it's only my opinion, are more expendable than others are. And
no, yes, I totally agree with you. I think my point being, though, if say if Newcastle for whatever reason didn't manage to sign a right winger, Almiron had a good pre-season, and it was between Murphy and Almiron. I think Almiron would start the first game of the season because I do think Eddie Howe still sees him with something to offer. Although we are now getting the stage where tough decisions.
If on the first day of the season, Andrew, the team selection is between Almiron and Murphy, we're in trouble in terms of progression.
I agree. No, that would represent a bad window if they haven't managed to bring in a right winger. But we are at the stage where tough decisions are going to have to be made. Eddie Howe is going to have to sacrifice.
Can I also mention, just for your interest, see what you think, and two other things regarding our right wing position of the current players we've got, before we get on to targets. One is that, and I know you're not a fan of this, and neither am I, but there's always the possibility. One is that Gordon and Barnes can be shoehorned into the team by one playing right and one playing left. And it needn't necessarily be Gordon on the right. It could be Barnes because he'd come in on that foot. So there is, I'm not suggesting that for 38 games, Gordon and Barnes are the two wide players to Isaac, but I'm suggesting there's a genuine chance of them playing in that position. And here's the wild card. Here's the wild card. What about the kid from Feyenoord, who's in the last 12 months has scored 14 goals from outside right for club and country. He scored 10 in the League and Cup for Feyenoord, plus a Champions League one, and 3 for Gambia. He is a kid that's still coming out of his teens. He's had a hell of a season under Slot, who's a good enough manager to be going to Liverpool. You know, I don't know. I don't see him enough. I didn't see him before we signed him, and I haven't seen him playing live for Feyenoord. So I don't know if he's good enough. But we must have thought he was to put 7 million out on a kid initially, and he's now their league's nothing like the Premier League in terms of intensity or how good the sides are. But he's done well, and he is almost now like a free transfer, like Kelly. If he comes in, and Eddie Howe said at the end of last season, he said, with financial fair play being what it is, we have huge restrictions. And he was talking about the coming transfer window. We've got huge restrictions in the transfer window, and we will have to be cute. We will have to be clever. Now, Kelly's one of those that's cute. You've got a guy in that, and yet a penny hasn't been spent on him in terms of financial fair play. The same would apply to this Minteh, however you pronounce it. He would be, because his money was spent in the previous financial year. So you've got to have a very close look at him from Eddie's point of view in pre-season and say, can we fast forward him? Would he be in a position to be a top player for Newcastle? Newcastle must have thought so a year ago, Andrew.
No, I've got him written down, and it's interesting. I also had the Barnes and Gordon theory, but I just can't see that happening because I think Gordon, as much as he can do a job on that right, he's so much more effective out on the left. But then you are left with £38 million Harvey Barnes, and how is he not in the
I was
first
going to say,
team?
why buy Harvey Barnes in if you've already got Gordon?
Exactly, that's the dilemma, and I was one of those people that tipped Harvey Barnes to be ahead of Anthony Gordon. Obviously, then things have transpired, the injury, and Gordon's had a storming season, so I'm happy to be proved wrong. But I just can't see how sacrificing Gordon's effectiveness out on the left and move him to the right to put Barnes on the left, and I can't see Barnes being put onto the right. So I think it will either be a new arrival or one of Almiron and Miggy on the right, and then it's Gordon first choice, alternating with.
I tell
Harvey
you what,
Barnes.
here's a controversial thing for you then, Andrew. If we get to the first game of the new season and we haven't bought an outside light, I would be happier for one game on the opening day to see Gordon on the right and Barnes on the left than I would to see either Miggy or Almiron, Miggy or Murphy on the right on the opening day. I'd rather see Gordon, Isaac and Barnes than Miggy or Murphy, Isaac and Gordon.
Yeah, I don't think you'd be alone in that, John, at all. And you won't be alone in the fact that if we are presented with that scenario, there'll be a lot of questions being asked about the transfer window. I just can't see how doing it. And I don't think, for what it's worth, we will be in that position. I think Newcastle will have signed someone on the right wing, or Yankuba Minteh may be given a chance. He's had a storming season, as you mentioned, at Feyenoord and me now, and spoke about him in length. In the Monday show, he's been linked with a £40 million exit to help with financial fair play, because of course that then kind of gives you 100 million to spend because of the way it works, and obviously there's a massive
that's
profit
buying this guy, Andrew. We're not
No,
going to get 40
totally
million.
accept.
I know, but we are journalists. That's journalistic license. You know, somebody sits down. What am I going to write about today? Because it's a close season. Oh, Slot has gone from Feyenoord to Liverpool. He had this kid on loan who's so fast he makes Usain Bolt look as if he's slow. So how about him signing him? And it rolls on. There's not a cat in hell's chance of that transfer going through. But he has, because Liverpool are a standard above where we are. Liverpool are above where we are, whether we like it or not. So, I don't think they're going to take that kid for one moment just because Slot got so much out of him last season at Feyenoord. But it shows the progress made by this lad that suddenly we're talking like this. And he's scoring goals for Gambia and he's scoring goals for Feyenoord. Now, I think, humble opinion, it's a huge step up from Feyenoord to Newcastle United, man. It's also a step up from Newcastle United to Liverpool. But that is a step up in it, and with Gambia as well. And I've got no idea because I haven't seen him enough whether he's any good. But we thought he was to put 7 mil out from him. So, is he ready yet? Has he fast forwarded a bit in the way that Livramento's fast forward and Hall's fast forward? And we hope within 12 months Trafford will fast forward, because at the moment Trafford's 21 and he's not going to replace Pope anytime soon in the first team. But maybe in 12 months' time it might be a different ballgame. But a decision's got to be made about this kid, because if we are, heaven forbid, don't get anybody, which we've talked about, then do you stick with Almiron and Murphy and Gordon and Barnes, or do you say, listen, keep Minteh in as well? He's quick. He's good. I mean, he's as quick or quicker than Almiron, and he seems to score more goals than Almiron one season apart. So, do you bring him into the equation?
It's certainly been talked about, and I think Eddie Howe will certainly take a really close look at Minteh over in Germany and then over in Japan, and then you've got the Seller Cup. So there's a big decision there to be made. I would like to think that even if someone came in with a bid of 25 million, which again I think is slightly optimistic, that Newcastle would still say we're going to have a real look at him before we decide to sell him. And if we do sell him, they'll be very clever with buyback clauses and sell-on clauses and what have you. So really interesting to see what happens there. I think that's probably the main thing people are looking forward to in the preseason, to see just how good Minteh is. It's really interesting, isn't it, John, that we're sitting here talking about potential exits on that right wing, and both of us agree that Jacob Murphy is probably, and I might be putting words in your mouth here, but I'll say it on my opinion, I think he's one of those guaranteed to stay this summer. I don't think there's any question of him being sold because of his versatility. No. As you said, he hasn't got the expectation of starting every game, but he doesn't half push, or he hasn't half pushed, Miggy, Barnes, Gordon for starting place in the 11 last season. And he'll do that again with whoever comes in. He is a massive asset to Newcastle United. And it just shows you.
He's a nailed-on sub, Andrew, I think. Yeah. He's a nailed-on sub. And he'll accept it, as I've said, more than Almiron. He's got other dimensions. I don't think he's as much of a headless chicken as Almiron is. And he would sit in that position. The manager genuinely likes him. I mean, he likes everybody, but he genuinely likes Murphy. And I would suspect in his mind, he thinks Murphy brings more to the squad than Almiron does. And I think Murphy will stay. And I know a lot of fans will say he's not good enough. We're not talking about having 22 first teamers. We're talking about having 11 first teamers and brilliant backup. And at this stage, Murphy would be more advantageous coming off the bench. And I think there's no chance whatsoever, unless somebody comes along with silly money in comparison. No, I think Murphy would be the one to stay, and Almiron would be the one to be sold.
Yeah, I mean, 7 assists for Murphy in the season just gone. Almiron, I think, got 2. So it shows you the difference. It shows you what Murphy brings to the table. But are you shocked, John, to be sat there saying that, given how his career started? It wasn't going well at Newcastle United. It looked on several occasions like he was going to head out the door. Loan spells at West Brom and Sheffield Wednesday. But under Eddie Howe, he's just become a real quality player. Okay, he's not the top of the tree by any stretch of the imagination, but everyone talks about his effort and commitment, which is brilliant. He's a Newcastle United fan. He's living the dream. But there's also end product there, which makes him stand out when you're talking about Almiron. That's what sets him apart. He's got the end product there. He's done it for more than one season. But are you still shocked to say, unless it's silly money, he's not going anywhere?
I'm surprised that the development has reached that stage, Andrew. I think that's absolutely true. And I've got to emphasise at this stage, in case anybody listening sort of jumps on a particular bandwagon and gets it wrong, I'm not advocating that Murphy should be Newcastle's outside right next season, first team wise. Not what I've advocated, if the people listen carefully to what I've said, is that he is an excellent benchman and occasional stand-in with injuries and has the qualities to deserve to stay here. Not to start if he starts every game next season, we've taken a backward step. If Almiron does it, we've taken a backward step. But as a backup, he's terrific. And I think he's deserved to stay. It is a little bit of a surprise because he looked to no hope at one time. I've got to be ruthlessly truthful about that. He looked to no hope. He's deserved this place. He's worked hard. He's infectious. He accepts whatever happens. It doesn't mean he likes it, but he accepts it. And that's the big difference, because you don't want, sulkers. And I'm not suggesting for 1 second Miggy is, for example, but you don't want sulkers. And he accepts the way things are. But like you, if we haven't a new outside right, I would be hugely disappointed, because it would be a backward step unless Minteh has come in pre-season and pulled up so many trees that we're all even more flabbergasted than we are talking about Murphy.
Yeah, well, let's talk about some of those names linked. We'll start with the big one, and that is Michael Olise. Now, I actually said on Monday's show, again with Aaron, that I didn't think Michael Olise was a realistic target, because he is one of the best in the Premier League. He's destined to move to a big club, and I couldn't, and I still can't really see him choosing Newcastle United. But if it is just between Newcastle United and Chelsea, I think Newcastle do stand a good chance. Firstly, because Chelsea haven't got a buckload of money. They will need to offer a player as well as cash, and Palace also are in the position where they need cash over player. So, that could work in Newcastle United's favour, as much as Newcastle are struggling or they're not struggling, but as much as Newcastle are bound by the financial restrictions. But just to see the fact that Newcastle have begun, to go down that road and have made contact, that's really exciting. I mean, how realistic, John, do you think it is, though, that they managed to get Olise through the door?
Right at this moment, I think it's unrealistic. But I half wanted to be realistic. Do I want it to be realistic? He would send my hopes soaring if he was playing outside right. Good gracious me, I would be strutting down Northumberland Street buying the big cigar. He would be a terrific signing for us. The difficulty is that his buyout clause is 60 mil. Can you... And I go back to Eddie saying we've got to be clever in this transfer market. If we pay 60 mil for an outside right, and albeit a one that's going to start in the first team, how much do we pay for a centre forward? And how much have we got left for a centre forward? I know the centre forward will be cover for Isaac, but it's still costly, a centre forward is. Take away these restrictions, have Manchester City win the situation with the Premier League when they're suing them, and we could buy Olise and pocket the loose change and never notice anything's gone. But life isn't like that. And at the moment, we've got Manchester United, Manchester City, Chelsea, and Bayern Munich all linked with them. Now, that is a pretty hard-hitting mob. I mean, Manchester United I'm cynical about, because evidently they haven't got two pennies to rub together unless they sell Maguire and a barrel load of other people. And Ten Hag is a limp along Leslie, right from the start. He's staying because there's nobody else that would work under certain circumstances. But if Man City want them, if Chelsea want them, by the way, we're saying, with Chelsea, there's a difficulty in cash. They seem to get round the cash situation. I mean, I think they're riding for a fall, and I think they could have points taken off them very quickly sometime in the future. I hope they do, because they have just ignored all the rules and just gone down their own route. And by the way, when we're saying, if there's only Chelsea, we might get them. Well, remember what they did to us with Tossin from Fulham. They gazumped us there so they could gazump us here. Olise is terrific. I mean, I would love to get him. And under normal circumstances, we could get him. And he would become a legend here. But Chelsea, okay. I mean, we're saying Crystal Palace would want to improve their side. They're the sort of club that has to sell their best player. We don't, but they have to. But if they're going to improve and do any better, then they've got to get new players in. And good gracious, I mean, Chelsea aren't short of players to offer them. They could offer them about 20 players and say you can have any three of those. You pick which three you want, and we'll give you X number of £1 million on top. And it's a difficult one. I would love it to be true. Probably of all the people that we are linked with, if money was not the problem and if the competition for the signature wasn't the problem, Elise is probably the one I would take before anyone else.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. He's that kind of statement signing. It would be a huge signing if Newcastle United managed to get it over the line. I mean, the other theory along the lines of Olise is that he goes to Chelsea and then Newcastle go on to sign Noni Madueke from Chelsea. Now, he cost them £28.5 million not so long ago, January 2023, when he signed from PSG. And he's played 35 times in the Premier League, scoring 6 goals. And he's supposedly a very good talent. I haven't seen too much of him. I suppose Newcastle United fans would say, well, if you're signing Olise in the same position, then is Madueke really good enough for Newcastle United if he's not good enough for Chelsea?
Yeah, well, I mean, I can follow that logic totally. I think that would be an underwhelming signing in terms of impressing the fans. But I'm not certain that the Newcastle fans were so thrilled when we signed Anthony Gordon, because from Everton, because he was a worky scouser, he was seen as, and he didn't hit the ground running, he hardly hit the ground walking. And I think there was a feeling, have we done a bad deal there? And it turned out to be one of the best deals we have ever done. Yes, I mean, it would rest uncomfortable with me. I think the Chelsea kid, is more than decent. And I think it would be an upgrade on Almiron, but it'd be a downgrade on Olise. So it's a hard sell when we are trying to say we are as good as Chelsea, or in lots of ways we're better than Chelsea because we're more organised and we're more disciplined and we've got a better transfer policy than a scattergun policy. So it would be a hard one to sell to the public initially. But, it would be easier if we don't get Olise to sell the Brentford kid or Jared Bowen.
Yeah, Brian Mbeumo from Brentford
Yes.
See, this is the issue. So when me and I were talking about who we would sign on that side, I shot down Olise because I just didn't see it as a realistic option. I think Mbeumo is a much more realistic option, and his stats are fantastic. Only 24, despite the fact he does look about 40. It wouldn't cost as much, I don't think, although he wouldn't be far off the price tag of 60 million. But he is proven to be a really good Premier League winger in a relatively average side. Him and Tony carrying Brentford, but he had to shoulder the burden because Tony was, of course, suspended for the betting.
He carried them to a great extent when Tony was out,
Yeah.
And he is quality, and I know you've mentioned him to me before. He is quality, 9 goals, 6 assists. He knows the Premier League. He's done it in the Premier League, and that's a big plus. That's a big plus when a player hasn't got to get used to the Premier League. He already knows it, which was a big plus with Kelly. And he's only 24. He would excite me. And you see, it's whether we're playing Fantasy Island, Andrew, or whether we're playing reality. In Fantasy Island, we sign Olise, we sign Enze, we sign 3 centre forwards. We'll just go in Fantasy Island. In reality, we don't do that. So in reality, they would sign the Brentford kid. They would try to get Bowen, which would be hard. They would try to bring Neto back home, but he wants to stay for his dosh, and he's not going to get the same dosh in Newcastle as he's getting in Saudi, that's for certain. So, the Brentford kids is probably, if we're boxing clever, as Eddie keeps going on about, is probably the sort of signing that could come here and end up doing a heck of a job for us.
I mean, it is interesting, and we always try to be realistic because shooting for the stars without the rocket to get there is never the way to to go about it. Although Newcastle are very serious about, or at least quite clearly, I'm just not ready to get my fingers burned by clapping with excitement just yet. If I'm being really realistic, I don't think Jared Bowen is a realistic target. I think he's absolutely brilliant, but while Newcastle maybe could pay the fee for him and they could match his wages, I think the very fact that he's very settled down in London. I think he's just had twins. His partner's Danny Dyer's daughter, so everything West Ham is about that family. And I know it's very easy to get a private jet up to Newcastle and what have you, but I do think that family element will really make it a difficult sell for him to move outside of London.
I can follow. That's all logic and it's all true. And I think it would be difficult to get him away from West Ham. But you know where that original story is supposed to come from? Danny Dyer. He was the one that quietly put out that Newcastle were in for Jared. So, and he's a massive West Ham fan, etc., massive football fan. But that's where the stories originated. So, it's before it's dismissed. And I think it'll be true. But having said that it's true doesn't mean it'll happen. It's true that we've asked for Olise. It's true that we wanted the Valencia keeper. But we end up walking away from those deals when they become too top-heavy financially. So I think it's true that how Fancy's born and has made you do make an approach to see what the kid thinks, to see how much the club want, to see what the resistance would be. And then it comes out that move has been made, but it doesn't mean you're going to go and get him. But Danny's is allegedly the source of where this particular bone thing come from. By the way, you do remember that because we always have a little dip off and Mr. Bush, he had him at Hull and almost signed him for Newcastle,
He had him at Wetherby Station, apparently, Wetherby service station, waiting for the go-ahead for Mike Ashley. And it's one of those where you do think, what if? A fantastic player. And I would love to see him.
He also had Rutherford, by the way, the Liverpool kid.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And then he gets all the wrong ones to come to Newcastle.
Right, Robertson, the left back.
Robertson, sorry, I do apologize.
Robertson. He had some great players at Hull. Just didn't quite work out at Newcastle. He's it's going to be interesting as well because little birdie tells me he's going to be on a sister Hull podcast in the next few weeks talking about his time at Hull. So might be an interesting listen there. But yeah, Bowen, fantastic. I mean, imagine, John, if we finish the transfer window, saying goodbye to Miguel Almiron, saying goodbye to maybe Callum Wilson, and saying hello to Michael Olise and Jared Bowen and a couple of other arrivals. It would be unbelievable, but I just can't see it happen. I think I can see one big signing. So whether it be Olise, whether it be Mbeumo, whether it be Bowen, I think I can see one big signing, and then the rest of them, some might say, will be an underwhelming signing, a bit like a Dan Burn. But you've got to back the manager. You've got to back the manager and the scouting staff that have done the homework.
And I think if there is a big signing, Andrew, it'll probably be the outside right. Because while the centre forward will cost a pretty penny, he will not be the big signing because he'll be the backup centre forward to Isak.
Yeah.
Whereas outside right will start. And they'll sign a right-sided centre half because they didn't get Tosson. But again, it might be like a Dan Burn type of signing or a free transfer, or it will not. They're not going to sign a 60 or 50 million pound centre half, and they're not going to sign a hugely priced centre forward. I think they'll look for a centre forward, in my humble opinion, in this sort of way that they've taken Trafford as the goalkeeper. Trafford's 21. His potential is tomorrow's huge star. He's today's very good backup. They've taken him early doors. Now, a centre forward like that, around 21, 22, 23, tomorrow's big star, huge backup, etc., but not ready-made, demanding to be the number one from day one. I think they'll look for that type of centre forward, as they have with Trafford in goal. They'll look for a genuine first-team right-sided centre-half, but he will not cost a fortune. So if there's big money to be spent, it'll probably be on the outside right.
It's the whole goalkeeper situation again, isn't it? That we talked about the other week about why you would spend 50 million on a goalkeeper not to have him guaranteed first team football. You're probably not going to spend 60, 70 million on a striker and have him playing second fiddle to Alexander Isak, to which you would be. I think if they do go after a striker, which I hope they do, and they need one, it will be someone young, fresh, raw. I keep mentioning Liam Delap as an option. I think he could be one name. And there are others there where you look around and are looking for someone to learn off, the likes of Alexander Isak and Callum Wilson.
When you were saying, Andrew, about and I said when you were saying if there was no restrictions and who would buy, and wouldn't it be great if it was Lucia backed up by Bone, and that's the fantasy island, and then there's the reality. If we were living on Fantasy Island, if Man City had already won their case against the Premier League and all restrictions were off, I have got to be honest, and I said in the podcast we done, I would have preferred the Valencia goalkeeper, because the Valencia goalkeeper from the first day of the season in August would put immense pressure on Pope. And in an ideal world, that's what you want. This kid will not put immense pressure on Pope. Whatever's said at his press conference when he arrives here, which will be him saying, I want the first team shirt, and will be Howe saying he's brought here to compete for the first team shirt. The reality is, the kid who was dropped for the last 10 games of last season to save him from getting shell shock has the huge potential, but he's for the future. He's not going to put the pressure on Pope. I would have preferred the Valencia goalkeeper who would have put the pressure on Pope from the start, but he would have cost 40 million or more, and that would have reduced the money for the outside right. It would reduce the money for the centre forward. So they've been clever. But I nailed my colours to the mast. The Valencia guy, he's first teamer, he's kept huge clean sheets in La Liga, he's a current international, would have been a better bet. But I fully understand why they're going down the route they're going down with Trafford. But he would have been the better bet. And that is the dilemma we face. Do we live in Fantasy Island, all restrictions off? Newcastle are a huge club. They've got as good a fan base as anybody in the country for passion and loyalty, and we can afford anybody. Now, that's the world we ought to be living in, but we're not. And if we're living in the real world, we sign Trafford, and, we sign a 21, 22-year-old centre forward. We splash big once, and that would probably be an outside right. And we sign a Dan Burn type of, if centre half, right-sided. I don't mean in terms of ability or pace or anything like that. I mean in terms of money. That's why it was a blow not to get Tossen. Because if he'd come in on a free along with Kelly, that would have been absolutely taken care of and not a penny spent.
Yeah, and you're right. It's just about getting that balance, isn't it, of the budget, and you have to get your calculator out. And again, You mentioned whether we're playing Fantasy Island or we're being realistic. I mean, another target that I would not be disappointed to see Newcastle United go after if this Olise deal can't be sorted out would be Anthony Elanga, who obviously plays for Nottingham Forest at the moment, former Manchester United winger, Swedish international. I think he's been absolutely brilliant since he's joined Forest. Last season, 5 goals, 9 assists. He did a really good job of Dan Burn on that Boxing Day.
I was going to say he tortured Dan Burn, didn't he? But he wasn't alone at that.
No, but I think he's the same age as Olise. He'd probably cost you maybe half of what Olise would cost you. Like, look, their career paths are probably going to go very different. Alanga's going to be a very good winger. Olise is going to be the best. So obviously that comes into play. But, if for whatever reason Olise goes to Chelsea, goes to Manchester United, my third choice, because I would like to see them go after Mbeumo, would be Anthony Elanga. I think he's real quality.
Yeah, I accept that. I think my second choice, if we didn't get Olise, would probably be Mbeumo. If I'm living in the real world, Jared Bourne would do me very, very nicely. But I think he's almost out of it. Not as much as Olise, but almost out of it. I mean, there'll come a day in a couple of seasons' time where we have increased our revenue and we've increased our position where we're regular in Europe and perhaps in the Champions League and perhaps won our first trophy, where literally it'll be grateful to come here and will be well within our range. It's just, is that moment now? Probably not quite. But I tell you what, if they somehow manage to fiddle the books, and I don't mean fiddle it illegally, I mean work it where it could be done to get him, what a lift. What would that be like? I mean, dear oh dear, you'd have to tie my ankles down to the bottom of the chair I'm sitting on to stop me floating in the air. That's the sort of signings we want. But we've got to walk before we run, and we've got to be realistic about that. In the old days, you didn't, and in the days when Manchester City started their revolution way back, they weren't restricted by financial fair play and could do anything they like. We haven't had that courtesy.
Yeah, it will be certainly some sign. Very exciting to see how this one goes. John, if you were sitting down with Michael Olise and his agent, and they said, "Look, it's between you guys and Chelsea. You've offered the same amount of money on that weekly wage. What?" And he goes, persuade me it's Newcastle that I should come to. What would you say?
I'd say, well, first of all, look at the other options first. Chelsea are a basket case. You're as likely to end up not getting a game at all as being a superstar. There's a revolving door on the dressing room for players going in and out. It's an absolute basket game. It doesn't matter. It's scattergun signing. You're one of 28. Do you honestly want to be part of that, or do you want a sane life? If you're going to Man City, you're only going to be one of 15 stars. They're the most magnificent club. They've won the titles 4 times out of 5 and 5 times out of 6. And they're terrific. They're wonderful. But they can buy people like Grealish for 100 million and then he's on the way out now. There's no guarantee. You wouldn't be the star there. You would be a star there. Manchester United, not much short of the basket case Chelsea have got. Newcastle United, whole different ball game. New owners, real focus on where this club's going, a real determination, a manager who, if he can put 25 hours into a 24-hour day, will do so. A manager with a great tactical sense, a great man manager. Players absolutely love him, almost to a man. You'll never get everybody loving the manager because the manager doesn't pick some players, inevitably, but is absolutely adored. And I haven't even mentioned the greatest asset you've got in the whole world, which is the Newcastle United fans. Because if you think Man City fans are grateful and good in depth, Man United are prawn sandwich. Chelsea just don't know if they're coming or going. And, do you want to go to Bayern Munich? Do you want to go to Broad? I mean, Harry Kane started doing that because he thought he'd get medals. And look what's happened to him this season. No medals at all, same as Spurs. Come to Newcastle and you will be a hero at Newcastle. And I'm talking about a hero like you've never believed. Because if you're a hero here, you're on top of Gray's Monument. I mean, they're just waiting to put somebody up there. And it could be him. And you would be an absolute hero. And you know what? Take the thought that Kevin Keegan said to me when he come to Newcastle. He said, and he has said since, why go to Manchester United straight after Ferguson? Why go to Arsenal straight after Wenger? You're just going to you're not going to be an eye-opener. The success is already there. Go to Newcastle. Last won the title in 27, last won a domestic cup in 55, last won anything in 69, and they get 52,000 every week. If we win an argument, the town will buzz for the rest of the year. I mean, we are the original sleeping giant. Those others aren't. They ebb and flow to and go. You come here, you turn a sleeping giant into a roaring bull, and you're made for life. You just continue living up here after you've retired. You won't have to buy a meal or buy a drink for the rest of your life. Sign for us. Don't go to the basket cases. Come to us.
There we go. Couldn't have said it better myself. Michael, if you're watching, that's exactly why you need to join Newcastle United. Amanda, Jamie, me, Dad, if you want the best salesman in the business, I'll give you John's number later on. To you guys watching and listening, thank you. As always, leave us a rating review on the audio platform. It's much appreciated. Give the video a thumbs up and get in the comments if you're watching on YouTube. Thank you, as always, for your support. And for myself and John, we'll see you guys next week.